The Monday after my son's wedding, I called my financial advisor and told her to restructure everything. She paused on the other end of the line. "All of it, Norma?" "All of it," I said. "Start with the TFSA, then the rental properties, and pull up the trust documents. I want to revisit the beneficiary designations." She said she'd need a few days. I told her to take the week. Then I made myself a cup of red rose tea, sat down at my kitchen table in my little apartment in Guelph, and looked out the window at the parking lot below. A sparrow was sitting on the hood of someone's old Civic, just sitting there, not going anywhere. I understood exactly how it felt. Let me back up. I have worked my whole life, not in any glamorous way. No corner office, no business card that impressed anyone at a dinner party. I spent 31 years as a lunch supervisor and then a custodial coordinator at an elementary school in Waterloo. I wore a navy vest with the school board logo on it. I ate my lunch at 11:15 in the morning because that was when the first wave of kids came through. I knew every child's name by October, every teacher's coffee order, which hallway got icy first in January. When my husband passed, that was 17 years ago now, I didn't fall apart the way people expected me to. I had 2 children to raise still, a mortgage that was almost paid off, and a very clear understanding that no one was going to take care of us if I didn't. What people didn't know, what I never told anyone, was that my husband had left behind a life insurance policy that I invested carefully, that I had been quietly buying GICs and index funds through my credit union for 15 years, that I owned a small duplex in Cambridge that I'd bought in 2003 for $212,000, and which was now worth close to $800,000, and that I had never, not once, spent money trying to look like something I wasn't. I drove a 2009 Corolla. I bought my clothes at Winners. I made soup on Sundays and froze it in portions. My colleagues at the school thought I was careful with money. They had no idea I was sitting on just over $2 million in assets. I didn't hide it to be mysterious. I hid it because the moment you tell people you have money, you stop being a person to them. You become a resource. I'd watched it happen to my neighbor when she sold her business. Her adult kids started calling every week. Suddenly, everyone had a project, a need, a dream that just required a little help getting started. I didn't want that. I wanted to be loved for being their mother, not for what I could hand them. My son, I'll call him my son, because that's what he is. That's all he's ever needed to be to me. He grew up knowing we weren't rich. We weren't poor either, but I was deliberate about that impression. He worked summers, paid for his own car insurance, graduated from university with a small OSAP loan that he paid off himself. I was proud of that, proud of him. Then he met her family. Her father ran a home renovation company in Oakville. Good money, or at least the appearance of it. They had a house with a 3-car garage and a kitchen island the size of a small boat. Her mother wore jewelry to casual dinners. They talked about their cottage on Georgian Bay the way I talked about the weather, constantly, casually, like it was just a given part of life. My son was dazzled. I understood it. He was 32, he'd worked hard, and here was this family that seemed to have everything sorted out. Their daughter was beautiful and confident and knew which fork to use. I didn't blame him for falling in love with her. I tried very hard not to blame him for what came after. The wedding was in September. Niagara-on-the-Lake. Beautiful venue, I'll give them that. Her parents paid for most of it, and they made sure everyone knew it. Her father gave a speech that was 20 minutes long and mentioned the renovation company 4 times. I sat at the family table and smiled and drank my 1 glass of Prosecco and thought, this is fine. This is his life now. Be happy for him. I had brought a card. Inside was a check for $5,000, a meaningful amount to most people, an amount I could write without thinking twice. I had also tucked in something I'd been holding for years, a Canada savings bond I'd bought in my son's name in the early 2000s. One of the last ones issued before the program ended. I'd kept it all this time, waiting for a moment that felt right. My daughter-in-law opened the card at the gift table. I was standing maybe 4 feet away talking to my cousin when I heard her laugh. Not a small laugh. A real one. "Oh my God," she said to her sister, "a savings bond. Is that even still a thing?" Her sister looked at it the way you look at something you found under a couch cushion. My son was right there. Right there. He looked at the card, looked at me, and then looked away. He said nothing. He turned back to his conversation like it hadn't happened. I kept my face completely still. It's something I learned a long time ago. How to keep your face still when the thing you're feeling is too large for a room full of people. I excused myself from my cousin, walked to the coat check, and I left. I didn't make a scene. I didn't say anything to my son. I got in my 2009 Corolla, and I drove back to Guelph, and I sat in my apartment, and I thought for a very long time. By the time the kettle boiled, I had made my decision. I want to explain something before I go further, because I think it matters. I was not angry about the savings bond comment the way you might expect. I wasn't hurt because she didn't appreciate the gift. I was hurt because of what the moment revealed. About her, yes, but more importantly about my son. He had stood there, he had heard her, and he had chosen his new life over his mother without even flinching. The savings bond was worth just over $4,000, by the way. The Canada Savings Bond Program had been discontinued in 2017, but bonds already issued continued to earn interest until maturity. I'd bought that one in 2002 for $500. It had compounded quietly for over 20 years. There's a lesson in that, but apparently my son's wife missed it. The Monday, after the wedding, I called my financial advisor. Her name is a name I'll keep private, but she's been with me for 11 years, and she knows me well enough to know that when I call first thing in the morning, something has shifted. I told her I wanted to restructure my beneficiary designations. My son had been the primary beneficiary on my registered accounts, my TFSA, my RRSP, my life insurance policy. I wanted to move the majority to my daughter, who lives in Halifax, and who had, incidentally, sent a beautiful, handwritten letter with her wedding gift and called me the week after to ask how I was doing. I also told my advisor I wanted to review the rental property situation. The duplex in Cambridge. The title was in my name only. I wanted to make sure it stayed that way and that my estate plan was clear about its disposition. She listened to all of this and then said carefully, "Is this about the wedding?" "It's about clarity," I said. She said she'd have the documents ready by the end of the week. In the months that followed, my son called occasionally. Not often. The calls were polite in the way that calls between people who aren't quite sure where they stand with each other are polite. He asked about my health. I asked about his work. We talked around the wedding the way you talk around a piece of furniture that's slightly too large for a room. You just keep navigating past it. I did not tell him what I had done with my accounts. I did not tell him about the duplex, or the investments, or any of it. I went to work. I supervised the lunchroom, which by then I was doing part-time as a casual position because I genuinely missed the kids when I retired. I made my Sunday soup. I drove my Corolla. In March, his wife's father's company ran into trouble. I only heard about it through my son. He mentioned it sideways, in the middle of a call, like he was hoping I wouldn't notice. Something about a contract dispute with a developer in Mississauga, a project that had gone badly over budget, some questions about the billing. He was vague. I didn't push. But I'm 67 years old, and I grew up watching people. Over the next few weeks, the calls became more frequent. My son started asking questions he'd never asked before. Had I ever thought about downsizing? Was I comfortable? He asked about the apartment once, whether I was happy there, whether I'd considered moving somewhere nicer. I told him the apartment suited me fine. The rent was reasonable, my neighbors were quiet, and I'd lived there for 9 years. There was a pause on the phone that lasted a beat too long. Then he said carefully, "Mum, I've been thinking. You've been so careful your whole life. You must have. Is there anything set aside?" There it was. I had wondered if this moment would feel satisfying. It didn't, quite. It felt sad in the way that confirmed suspicions always feel a little sad. You already knew. That's the worst part. You already knew. I'm comfortable, I said. Don't worry about me. Another long pause. Mom, her dad's company is in real trouble, like serious trouble. There could be some personal liability. The lawyers are looking at everything. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I was. Genuinely. Not for him, exactly, but for the situation, for what it was revealing about the life my son had built and what he thought it was made of. If things got really difficult, you should talk to a lawyer, I said, and a financial advisor. Those are the right people to help you with that. He went quiet. I love you, I said. Call me Sunday. I hung up and I sat with it for a while. It was my daughter who called me the following week. She's 40, lives in Halifax, works in healthcare administration. She's the one who drives 6 hours to visit me twice a year, who remembers my doctor's appointment dates, who texted me on the anniversary of her father's death just to say she was thinking about me. She said, Mom, what's going on? He called me. He's in a real panic. I know, I said. He seems to think you have money saved up. I do, I said. A very long silence. How much money? She said, and her voice was careful in the way you're careful when you genuinely don't know what you're walking into. I told her. She said very quietly, Mom, I know, I said. Why didn't you? Why didn't you ever? Because I didn't want any of you making decisions based on what I had, I said. I wanted you to make your own lives. And you did. You both did. Mostly. She was quiet for a moment. Is this about the wedding? The bond? It's about a lot of things, I said. But yes, the wedding is part of it. He's ashamed, she said. He was ashamed the moment it happened. I could see it in the photos. You know, the one where you're sitting at the table by yourself. He couldn't even look at the camera. I hadn't known that. I hadn't looked at many of the photos. He should have said something. I said. Right then. He should have said something. Yes, she agreed. He should have. The call I'd been waiting for, though I hadn't known exactly what form it would take, came on a Saturday in April. My son asked if he could come to Guelph. Just him, he said. He needed to talk. He arrived at 2 in the afternoon. I made coffee. He sat at my kitchen table and looked around the apartment the way he always had. The modest furniture, the framed photos, the handmade quilt on the back of the couch that had been his grandmother's. He'd grown up knowing this apartment, spending weekends here after I'd moved from the house. He knew every corner of it. He looked tired, genuinely tired, not just from the drive. He said, I should have said something at the wedding. I poured the coffee and sat across from him. Yes, I said, you should have. I didn't know what to do. I was embarrassed. Not of you, of her, of how she said it. But I froze and I made the wrong choice, and I've been living with that since September. Okay, I said. Is that it? He said. Just okay? What do you want me to say? I asked. That it's fine? It's not fine. You watched your wife mock a gift I brought in good faith and you said nothing. That hurt me. Not because of the bond. The bond is just a piece of paper, it's a symbol. But because you chose her embarrassment over my dignity in front of a room full of people. That's not a small thing. He looked at the table. No, he said. It's not. Tell me about her father's company, I said. He talked for a long time. The short version. A major commercial project in Mississauga had gone badly, over budget. There were allegations about billing irregularities. The developer was pursuing legal action, and there was a possibility that some of the financial exposure could flow through to personal assets, depending on how the business had been structured. The lawyers were still sorting through it. His wife was scared. They had a mortgage. They had the life they'd built, which had always been partly supported by the assumption that her family's money was solid ground. And now the ground was moving. What do you need? I asked. He looked up. I'm not asking because I've decided anything, I said. I'm asking because I want to understand what you actually came here to say. He was quiet for a long moment. I came to apologize, he said finally. Genuinely, not because of any of this. I would have come anyway. I've been trying to work up the courage for months. This just made it more urgent. I looked at him. I have known this person his entire life. I was there when he was born. I held him through ear infections and bad dreams, and the worst week of his life when his father died. I know the difference between what he says when he's scared and what he says when he means it. He meant it. There are some things you don't know about me, I said. And then I told him. I won't describe his face in detail because it feels unkind. He's my son. What I will say is that by the time I finished, the duplex, the investments, the TFSA, the whole picture, he had stopped looking at the table and was looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time in a long time. Maybe ever. The Corolla, he said at one point, and almost laughed. The Corolla runs perfectly well, I said. Mum, why? Because I didn't need anything more than what I had, I said. I needed the school board pension and enough to sleep at night, and for my children to not know that money was available to them so they'd go build their own lives. Which you did. Which your sister certainly did. I was proud of both of you. Was, he said quietly. Am, I said. Still am, but something has to change. Not with the money, that's already changed, and I'll tell you about that separately. What has to change is what happened in September. That can't be the kind of husband you are. It can't be. Not to her, not to anyone. He nodded. He looked like he was 17 again, sitting in this same kitchen after he'd done something he knew was wrong. Your sister is the primary beneficiary now, as I said. On the registered accounts. I made those changes in October. He didn't flinch. That surprised me a little. Maybe it shouldn't have. That's fair, he said. It's not permanent, I said. Nothing is permanent. But I need to see who you are going to be. Not what you promise. I'm 67 years old. I've heard a lot of promises. I need to see how you treat people who can't do anything for you. I need to see how you treat me when you think I'm just your mother who drives an old Corolla and makes soup. He was quiet for a long time. Okay, he said finally. Okay, Mum, I understand. That was 14 months ago. He has called every week. Not just to check in. Real calls. The kind where you talk about actual things, where he tells me something true about his life and asks me something real about mine. He drove up in November to help me replace the weather stripping on my door. He came for Easter with his wife, and she was different, quieter, genuine in a way she hadn't been before. I don't know what happened in that house after September. I didn't ask. Some things you have to let people find their own way through. The lawyers sorted out her father's situation. There was a settlement. Some assets were sold. The cottage on Georgian Bay is gone. They downsized to a smaller house in Burlington. People adjust. People learn things about the difference between the life they thought they had and the one that's actually real. My son learned something too. I think. I'm watching. The duplex in Cambridge went up in value again this year. It's worth close to $900,000 now. I have no plans to sell. I still drive the Corolla. I made soup last Sunday. I had a call with my financial advisor in the spring to review everything, and we had a good conversation. And at the end of it, she said, "You've built something really solid, Norma." I said, "I know, that was always the plan. Here's what I want you to take from this, if you take anything at all. The savings bond I brought to that wedding was worth $4,000. It had started as $500. It grew because I put it somewhere safe and I left it alone and I didn't touch it even when things were hard. That's the whole story. That's the whole lesson. The things you tend quietly, without needing anyone to see you tend them. Those are the things that last." My son's wife laughed at a piece of paper in an envelope. She didn't know she was laughing at 30 years of patience. She didn't know she was laughing at the thing that was going to outlast everything she thought she had. Now she knows, and so, I think, does he.